Hello and welcome to The Chat. I am Will Peebles with the Public Information Office, and you are listening to the official podcast of Chatham County government. And today I have a very important member, in my opinion, of Chatham County government, Miss Tara Jennings. How are you doing today, Tara?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Tara is the Director of Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs. Is that right? Relatively new title. When I talk to people about the county, I do talk about you a lot, where I say, Tara kind of makes sure that a lot of things happen behind the scenes. You know, you see the commissioners and everything. Kind of talk a little bit about what your job is before we get into what we're going to talk about today.
So part of my job is really like keeping it moving, if you will. Although not in the title, I do have a responsibility of the strategic plan. And this is something that the Board of Commissioners vote on every couple of years as their priorities and what they want to see done. And so I have an awesome responsibility of working not only internally but externally with our units of government, with departments, with external and stakeholders to make sure that we can fulfill the needs of the board. And so whatever their priorities are, could be, we want to see recreation expanded. It could be we need to have new policy, or we need to diversify our funding. I work with the impacted departments and units to make sure those things come to fruition.
And that actually plays into really well what we're going to talk about today, which is our legislative priorities, because it's often that Chatham County can do a lot on its own, but it goes a lot further and often a lot faster when we involve our partners at the state level and our partners at the federal level. So kind of tell us a little bit about how your role plays into that. How do we reach out to these people? How do we get with our state senators? How do we get with our federal Congress people? What do we do?
So there's a couple of things that we do. We have periodic meetings with them, but more importantly, it's really a staff-to-staff relationship. So the elected officials are really important, and they are the decision makers, but it's the staff that are on the front lines that help us in navigating some of those things. We also have contracted state and federal lobbyists, which help to navigate that a little bit, but it is personal relationships with those individuals and their team members. And so while we can take our priorities, one, the board decides what the priorities are, so let's just take its infrastructure or its housing. We take that as a big umbrella topic to our state and federal delegate team, and then they say, well, here's what we're working on. And we try to find the similarities between what we're working on and what they're working on, and how can we push something through that benefits both sides. The other thing about it is they're not in Chatham County, in Savannah, Georgia, with the residents every single day. And so we become that mediator between the people of what we hear either through PIO office, through the other departments such as the police department or other units, and then we can take that message back. If they have a bill or a policy that they're considering and they want to know how it's going to impact people, then they'll send it to us. And we have the opportunity of either floating it through one of our platforms and saying, hey, what do y'all think about this? And then providing that feedback back to our delegate team, or we can review it with legal and say, this really doesn't work well in how we have to operate day-to-day operations. So it's a good relationship. It hasn't always been beneficial. We don't always agree. But we've come to a point where we can agree to disagree, but we all have a similar mindset of trying to make improvements for our community.
For sure. This is yes, it's a yearly process where we say these are our strategic priorities for the coming legislative sessions. What is this year's? What are we looking at? I know you mentioned housing, infrastructure. Those are big topics. What are we asking them for? What does Chatham County want?
So as many people know who live in Chatham County, infrastructure is a huge challenge for us. We have water, drainage, bridges, roads, all of those things are infrastructure. And with the population growing like it is, we need to be able to keep up. And so thankfully, the residents did affirm that vote with SPLOST. But SPLOST is used actually to leverage other funds. And so we use it to leverage our state DOT funds or our federal DOT funds. We also are having conversations about how you can widen roads. So, for example, we can widen a road through SPLOST like Little Neck, and it gets to the interstate, crosses over 95. We have to have our federal delegate team help us navigate that, because we can't touch the road, the pieces of the road that go over the federal highway without their input and their support. And so it takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of work. I'm sure people think about, well, the Truman or other, Veterans Parkway or other things, they are very time consuming. And so we have to have a vision for today, even though we know we're already somewhat behind in some of those projects. So infrastructure is a huge piece for us on the state and federal level. The other piece that we're still trying to figure out is how do we navigate and be able to pay for fire services. In some communities, city municipalities have an opportunity of doing a fund or a fee. Apparently, county governments can't, and so we're trying to figure out that. And as you well know, we just took back over the fire department in the last 2 years, so trying to figure out how to do that in the most efficient and effective way is a part that we're asking some support from our state, because we realize Chatham County is just one county of 159 counties who are all trying to figure this out. The other area of interest for us kind of falls again in the SPLOST area, but more in the recreation and diversifying our recreation facilities. We did a really big, nice ribbon cutting at Scottsdale Park with the Airnasiums. That was the first time we had tried that, and that went over really well, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback from that. So we want to be able to do that more often. So we're not asking the state or the federal to do 100%, but really to come in where we're having SPLOST and match us on some of these projects. Because the other thing is, if Chatham County becomes the hub for these regional or statewide competitions, then we all benefit from that. So those are a couple of things. Probably on a little bit deeper in the weeds. For many people, we also acknowledge that the farmers market that's out in Garden City is outdated, and so we are asking for some consideration through Department of Agriculture to make improvements to that facility so that it can be more useful to the 2025 farmers and produce people who are in our community. And that also allows a lot of our residents to have options for healthy food. And so we're not saying that grocery stores aren't important, but people need other options. And so that's one of the areas. We're also looking at, some heirs property issues. This is something that, Chatham County, because of its rich culture and history, there are some families who have 10 and 11 heirs to their property. And the state law is really not clear on how that works and how those properties are probated and who's responsible for maintaining the taxes and things like that. So we're trying to clean up some of those things that will help support our judicial side. And we also are looking at some, renewable energy and thinking about how we can be ready for, sustainability long term and how are we being more resilient in our community. And so looking at those types of things. So it's a diverse things that we're talking about that could be an array of things. On the federal level, we're not only focused on infrastructure, housing is another piece to that. And Chatham County hasn't historically done a whole lot in the housing development space, but that is something by the board's direction that the past few years we've been really delving into a little bit more. And so asking for some support from our federal lobbyists on that in regards to diversifying the way HUD looks at housing and how they classify eligible projects would be something that we would be asking for. Another thing that we're dealing with in the public health or the public safety space is when an individual is detained at the detention center, after 30 days they lose benefits, and then that becomes a burden. And if they are released from jail, they don't have health coverage, they don't have other things. And so then that also becomes, a challenge. And so we're trying to, by law, they're innocent until proven guilty. So how do we allow them to keep their benefits a little bit longer until they can go through the judicial system? So there's, again, it's different pieces for different things, but at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the residents and the most vulnerable population in Chatham County are taken care of.
And what's interesting is you hear all these things, like when there's a transportation project, the DOT match, they come in and they do their portion of it, Chatham does their portion of it. If it goes over to the interstate, the feds do their portion of it. But even the little stuff, like the farmer's market, you got to go to the Department of Agriculture for that. This is where all of that rubber meets all of that road. And I don't know, how do you maintain the relationship so that it's is it just hey, lobbyists, go get this? You guys know the people up there, or is it Tara? Is it the commission? Is it people on the ground here having those conversations too?
It's a little bit of all that.
Yeah.
So usually we work with our lobbyists to identify these projects, and then we have strategic conversations about, okay, who's the best route to make this happen. We do reach out to the commissioner either by ourselves or in partnership with a lobbyist. And then we usually try to identify someone on our delegate team that can be a champion.
Yeah.
So identify that elected official and help them or assist them in navigating, and they assist us in navigating. We give all the information that we've learned and gained from that and help educate them, and then they can help get us across the finish line in some cases. But sometimes these are not onesie, twosie projects. These are 2 and 3 year projects that take a lot of time to work through. And I often kind of joke about the job is very much like playing the game of chutes and ladders. You can try to climb up a little bit and you get knocked down, and so you just move over a couple of blocks and try again. And it may be that there's a new person. It might be that there's a new way of phrasing something that then after time you learn to navigate that a little bit differently. But the other thing about this is we have to be mindful that there's always these emergent topics that come up. We can sit here and talk about this all day long, right? But then all of a sudden there's a drone policy that they're going to implement, or there's a, euthanasia policy that they want to put in. And so from time to time during a legislative season, we can get calls about an array of topics. And so that's really where the stakeholders and our team members really come into play, because those are not areas that I've been briefed on. And so whenever I need help, there's a lot of people behind me that can help educate me that we can respond in the most efficient way.
Yeah, for sure. And we talk about it now. This is the time of the year where all the eggs and issues breakfasts, or they don't call it that anymore. It's something else now.
Biscuits and bills and biscuits.
Bills and biscuits. Sounds delicious too, But this is the time of year where it all pops up because the legislative session starts in January. But this is not just a December, January idea. This is something that happens the whole year round, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know. How do you keep up with it, Tara? That's my question. When you were rattling them off earlier, I was like, dang, Tara, you've been living in this.
Yeah, I live in it. So there's different tricks to the trade, if you will. Whether it's a spreadsheet or a project management app or things like that, because these are projects in all reality. Thankfully, because we do have, contracted lobbyists, they kind of help keep us in the, here's what's happening, here's what's moving. But it is also our relationship with ACCG and NACO. They have weekly legislative calls. And so on any given week, once session starts in January, between January and March, there's probably 5 to 6 phone calls that I'm on any given week talking about a array of these projects. And sometimes it's not me talking, it's more listening and hearing what's happening and then being able to run it down through our people. But it's probably like anything else. You just kind of become second nature to what you're doing. And I think the other thing about it is when you think about the fact that it's not just a policy, it's going to make things better for the residents, then you become passionate about it. And when you're passionate about it, you just kind of carry that with you all the time.
Do you feel good about it? Do you get a chance to feel good about it in between all the work?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there are times I think, part of it when you have provided direct services in the past, and then you get into this space and you feel like you're kind of removing yourself. But then, a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking or something like that, when you actually see the work come to fruition, or there's a resolution that's passed by the board. Sometimes people don't always see it because it's not bricks and mortar. There's a lot of policies that's happened behind the scenes. That feels, validating, and it feels like, we've done the right thing. But there's always room for improvement. And so, yes, it is a constant ebb and flow. And as soon as the session's over, then we start thinking about the next session. And then we have congressional directed spending requests. And you've got all these other things that fit within that. And so it's a constant back and forth with the delegate staff, our team, to make sure that we're on point as much as we can be.
You get me fired up about working here, Terry. I love talking to you about it. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us and enlightening us about this. You're so knowledgeable about this. I just appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us as well. If you want to learn more about this, we will have some information about it online. With the post of this podcast, we'll be sure to include these 2 handy dandy packets designed by our PIO team. Abby Murphy, shout out. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the chat, and we'll see you next time.